causes the gallbladder to contract and release the bile, and the bile travels down this duct and ultimately goes into the small intestine through this little duct called the ampulla of Vader. And the ampulla of Vader is typically a sphincter that opens up to allow the bile and other substances. So these substances come from the gallbladder, this comes from the pancreas, and these two ducts combine to a common duct that allows the pancreatic enzymes as well as the other substances produced by the pancreas, which include bicarbonate, and the bicarbonate is produced to help to neutralize the acid from the stomach. Okay, so bile, that talks about the constituents. It can have it's alkaline, it contains bile pigments, salts, cholesterol, phospholipids, electrolytes, and the chief bile pigment is bilirubin, which, as I said, is a breakdown product of red cells and the hemoglobin. So the important functions of bile, mainly it's to emulsify fat, and without it, your feces, as I said, starts appearing very pale, and it starts floating in the toilet. So this just gives an idea of what emulsification is. So it is going to increase the surface area available to the enzymes for digestion, and it allows the fat to be completely digested. So the gallbladder, as I said, responds to cholecystokinin. So chole typically refers to gallbladder. So if you have a cholecystectomy, that means they took out your gallbladder. They can, in many cases, do that without having an open surgery, but they do it laparoscopically. So the pancreas, we've gone over some of the functions of the pancreas. We said before that it's a retroperitoneal organ, which means that it is located mostly behind the peritoneum. I believe the head of the pancreas is within the peritoneum, but you have dual components, the endocrine and the exocrine pancreas. The endocrine pancreas produces hormones like insulin, glucagon, somatostatin, or amylin. The exocrine pancreas produces bicarbonate as well as a number of enzymes, different proteases, collagenases, nucleases, all sorts of different enzymes which we mentioned, or I mentioned previously, and I think we'll talk about more in a little bit. So looking at the pancreas, as I said, if you have too much alcohol, that can stimulate pancreatitis, where the pancreas starts auto-digesting itself. You have acinar cells, which are the exocrine cells. The endocrine cells are typically found in what are known as the islets of Langerhans. And the beta cells within the islets are the cells that produce insulin. The alpha cells produce glucagon. So you can see what the islets of Langerhans look like. And patients with type 1 diabetes literally produce autoantibodies against the islet cells, particularly the beta cells. So if you lose your ability to make insulin, you then ultimately will die without getting exogenous insulin. You go into diabetic coma, the cells can't internalize the glucose, so they start digesting protein and fat, which leads to an abundance of ketone bodies, so you get a lot of acetate, which then combines into the ketone bodies, the beta-hydroxybutyrate, acetoacetate, and acetone, which then can cause you to go into ketotic coma because of the acidity increases, so your pH drops, and that can ultimately kill you. So the cause of type 1 diabetes is unknown, but it tends to occur following a viral infection. Type 1 diabetes used to be known as juvenile diabetes because more often than not, children got type 1 diabetes, but these days, even those individuals in their 20s, 30s, and 40s can come down with type 1 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is by far the most common. Typically 90% of patients have type 2 diabetes, and type 2 diabetes, unlike type 1 diabetes, is where the insulin receptor becomes desensitized. So there's what's called insulin resistance. So if the transduction pathway is not working well, you don't get the insertion of those GLUT transporters into the cell membrane, and that then causes your blood sugar to increase. And there are various different medications that either increase the glucose or they decrease the glucose concentration in the body by stimulating the secretion via the kidney, or there are other methods that increase the effect of insulin, whatever insulin is around. All right, so the pancreas, we talked about that, the two different types of cells. Here you can see the different hormones like gastrin, gastric inhibitory peptide. These are produced in the intestinal mucosa. Gastrin is produced by the pylorus. We'll see a number of the enzymes that are produced by the pancreas, but they can include a number of different, as I said, ribonucleases, collagenases, and other enzymes that are very good at digesting the food. The intestinal mucosa also produces a number of the disaccharidases, like lactase, certain other enzymes that degrade the 2 carbon units to be able to allow the production of monosaccharides that the intestinal tract can absorb. So digestion, the proteases that are produced include typically enzymes that need to be activated. So the two major pancreatic proteases, which are typically released in inactive form, include trypsin and chymotrypsin. So the inactive forms are trypsinogen and chymotrypsinogen. So once trypsin is formed, it activates chymotrypsinogen, and you have mechanisms that keep them from being activated while they're still within the pancreas. So they typically get activated when they're released into the small intestine. You also have pancreatic lipase. So if an individual has pancreatitis, the physician will oftentimes look in the blood to see whether or not there's pancreatic amylase or lipase being found in the blood, which gives them an idea that pancreatitis is occurring. So these are some of the different enzymes that are formed: ribonucleases, gelatinase, elastases. You also have bicarbonate water, and as I said, amylase, which hydrolyzes starch into maltose. So the maltose then gets broken down by other enzymes. All right, so this is a very blurry slide, but it shows the different organs that are involved in digestion. So the liver and the pancreas are two of the major organs. Besides those found, typically you have mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine. Those are the pathway that the food typically takes. So that is the end of this lecture series for the digestion PowerPoint. Next time I'll go into the book chapter, what chapter is digestion? I believe 21. So I'll go through those, and then on Friday I'll post a take-home exam that, like I said, is going to contain approximately 10 or 11 essay questions, and you'll have the weekend to be able to do that. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to email me.